In this game design pattern, we're going to have a look at how we can have the non-player characters evading the player. And this is really just achieved by reversing the chasing pattern. So if we look at the chasing pattern set up a monster speed and then use this to change each monster's X and Y coordinates based on whether they were to the left or right for X or above or below for Y. And the idea was to change the coordinates to get closer to the player. To evade the player, we simply reverse the amount that's being added here. So instead of subtracting when we're bigger than X, we'll add on. And instead of adding on when we're less than X, we will subtract. So we're just swapping these around effectively. This here is the Birkdale teams on Replit. So I'm going to go down to Team Project. And I'm looking at Customize Your Core, number 9. So when you load this up, you should get your own fork of the project. I will need to automatically or manually fork the project here so that I don't mess up the original files. So as things stand, we have a basic game in which a cop wanders around. It's steerable by the player, and we get points based on how fast we hit the zombies who are in a small group. So what we are going to do is we're going to set up a monster speed constant, and we can tweak this. So monster speed, we'll set it out to be 2.0, and we'll tweak that to make for a better game later on. So then we go down and we find the section in which our monsters are moving. So for monster and NPC list, at the moment we have a random walk, a drunken walk, where it's just randomly staggering around. And what we want to do is to instead run away from the cop. So if we look at what we've got at the moment, we have this, and you can see that the cop is able to move around and bounce off the walls, but the zombies are just jiggling around with no real control. So what we want to do instead is to have a look at each monster and then decide what to add on or subtract instead of just a random number. So let's go in here inside the for loop and say if monster 0, now monster 0 is the X coordinate of a monster, so if monster 0 is greater than X, so that would mean that it is to the right on terms of the screen for that. So normally we would want to move further away. So we would look at that point, and I'm going to tab this in. Monster 0 is monster 0. And then instead of a random walk here, we're going to say it's going to be plus monster speed. So that's what we set up there. And we could just do that, monster speed. And then we're going to do the same thing for our Y. So we're going to say if monster 1 for the Y, if monster 1 is bigger than Y, then at that point we will have our monster 1 changing. So let me tab that in. So monster 1 plus monster speed. Okay, well what if it's not bigger than X? What if it's on the other side? So we need to have an else in here. I can just take out that comment now because it's no longer a drunken walk. So we're going to put in here an else. And quite simply we do the opposite. So monster 0 will be monster 0 minus monster speed. And then the same for our Y. So we're going to say if monster1 is not bigger than y, then we want to go in the opposite direction. So there's an else, and monster1 equals monster1 minus monster speed. And then all of the other checking is as before, just to keep them on the screen. So if we run that, you can see that instantly what's happened is they've all gone and popped out to the edge of the screen, but they're kind of jiggling about there in the corners. And if I was to go and try getting into that corner, and you notice they got there very, very quickly as well. So the game is going to be a little bit difficult to play now. So one of the things that we can do, instead of having them just all running away at the same speed, we can add a bit of randomness here. So monster speed times random.random. So random.random gives us a number between 0 and 1. So it will be a fraction of monster speed. And we can take that and we can apply that to all of the directions. So let's just delete that bit there. And now they are moving away less quickly, and I still get a chance to get some points. But we still have this problem of when they get into the corners, they just try and get as far into that corner as possible, and it makes it a very difficult game. So what we're going to do instead of having them trapped on the screen, we're going to have them flip around, what's called a screen wrap. So you can see here, this is all the code that prevents them from leaving the screen. But let's, instead of preventing them from leaving the screen, let's keep them on, but flip them round to the other side. So if monster 0 is less than 0, then monster 0 will then be max width plus a little bit to take them off the edge. Let's not bother with the random bit there. Let's just take them to max width. If the monster is bigger than the max width, then we're going to take them down to be at 0. If monster 1 is less than 0, let's take it to max height. And if monster 1 is bigger than max height, let's take it down to 0. So we should really tidy up these comments because it's changing what's happening. Now you'll see that what happens is they all go and get themselves stuck in the corner of the screen. And there's a little bit of flickering as they jump backwards and forwards too. So this is a little bit too harsh in terms of where it's flipping around. So okay, let's put the random back in then. So if they go off one edge, if they go off the left-hand edge of the screen, let's put them on at max width minus random.randint between 0 and maybe 100. If they go off the other edge of the screen, then let's put them on at random.randint 0 to 100. And if they go off the top end of the screen, let's put them on at max height minus random.randint 0 to 100. And if they go off the bottom of the screen, let's put them on at random.randint 0 to 100. So they shouldn't be right at the very edge of the screen now. There'll be a little bit of popping, I guess. What does that look like? So you can see, yeah, they are popping on and off the edges of the screen, and we are having to chase them a little bit to make that happen. And our cop's maybe moving a little bit fast now. And we can, of course, tweak the monster speed. So starting at 2.0, if we take it down to 1, then we might get a more playable game. So we can still chase and catch them, but they are trying to get away from us. And if you want something a bit more sophisticated than this, there is one of the design patterns called a proximity sensor, which only moves them away when they are actually close to the cop. So possibly worth looking at that particular tutorial.